The millionaire who lives like a normal person. This story will touch your heart. Meet the millionaire who found true fulfillment in living a simple, genuine life, free from the pressures and distractions of his immense wealth. Join us as we explore his inspiring journey and learn about the profound impact simplicity can have on a person's life. Are you ready to discover the true meaning of richness? Let's dive in. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and share this story if it moves you, and tell us your thoughts in the comments. The fluorescent hum of the Food Mart grocery store in Maple Creek, Ohio, was a familiar symphony to Arthur Finch. It was a Tuesday afternoon, usually a quiet time, but today the aisles buzzed with the pre-dinner rush. Arthur, a man in his late 50s with a neatly trimmed salt and pepper beard and kind, crinkled eyes, navigated his cart with unpracticed ease. He wore a faded blue polo shirt, khaki shorts, and well-worn New Balance sneakers, an outfit indistinguishable from any other retiree or suburban dad in the store. His reusable canvas bags, emblazoned with the logo of the Maple Creek Public Library, hung neatly from the cart's handles. He paused at the organic produce section, carefully inspecting a bunch of kale. "Looks fresh today, doesn't it, Mr. Finch?" a cheerful voice chirped beside him. It was Brenda, the produce manager, a woman with a perpetually optimistic smile and a knack for remembering every customer's name and preferred vegetable. "It certainly does, Brenda," Arthur replied, offering a warm smile. "Just the right crispness for a good stir-fry tonight." He placed the kale into his cart, next to a modest selection of chicken breasts, brown rice, and a carton of almond milk from the Silk brand. His shopping list, handwritten on a small notepad, was concise and practical. No exotic imported cheeses, no artisanal chocolates, no premium cuts of Wagyu beef. Just the essentials. As he moved towards the dairy aisle, his phone, an older model iPhone 8, vibrated in his pocket. He pulled it out, squinting slightly at the screen. It was a notification from Fidelity Investments. A quick glance showed a figure with 9 zeros, followed by a decimal point and 2 more numbers. A figure that, for most people, existed only in dreams or lottery fantasies. Arthur, however, barely registered it. He simply swiped it away, his focus already shifting to comparing prices between 2 brands of yogurt, Chobani, and the store brand, Food Mart Select. He opted for the latter, noting the slight price difference. Every penny counted, not because he needed it to, but because it was his habit, his way of life. He reached the checkout lane, choosing one that was relatively short. The cashier, a young man named Kevin, looked tired, likely a college student working a part-time shift. "Just these today, sir?" Kevin asked, scanning the items. "That's right, Kevin," Arthur said, pulling out his Chase Freedom credit card. "Keeping it simple." Kevin nodded, barely looking up. He wouldn't know that the man standing before him, patiently waiting for his total, was Arthur Finch, the visionary founder of Quantum Innovations, a tech company that had revolutionized healthcare data analytics and had been acquired by Omnicorp for a staggering sum just 5 years prior. He wouldn't know that Arthur's net worth dwarfed the entire annual budget of Maple Creek, Ohio, or that he could buy this entire Food Mart chain outright without blinking. Kevin just saw another customer, a polite, unassuming man who bought kale and store-brand yogurt. And that was exactly how Arthur liked it. What would you do if you suddenly became a millionaire? Would you keep your current lifestyle, or change everything? For Arthur Finch, the answer was clear. He chose to live a life that, on the surface, looked no different from yours or mine. But beneath that ordinary exterior lay a profound story of wealth, realization, and the deliberate pursuit of true fulfillment. If Arthur's story already intrigues you, please like this story, subscribe to follow his journey, comment below with what you would do if you became a millionaire, and share this story with someone who needs a dose of inspiration. Arthur Finch's mornings began not with the jarring ring of an alarm, but with the gentle, persistent chirping of sparrows outside his window. He lived in a modest, 2-story colonial house on Elm Street, a quiet, tree-lined thoroughfare typical of Maple Creek. The house, built in the 1970s, was well-maintained but far from ostentatious. It had 3 bedrooms, a small garden, and a 2-car garage that currently housed his 2012 Honda Civic, affectionately nicknamed the Reliable One. He awoke at 6 a.m. sharp, a habit ingrained from decades of early starts during his startup days, but now driven by a different purpose, the quiet enjoyment of dawn. His first ritual was a simple one, making coffee. Not from a fancy espresso machine, but a trusty Mr. Coffee drip brewer that had served him faithfully for years. He ground his own beans, a medium roast from 8 o'clock coffee, savoring the rich aroma that filled the kitchen. While the coffee brewed, he would step out onto his small back porch, taking a deep breath of the crisp morning air. He'd watch the sun peek over the horizon, casting long shadows across Mrs. Henderson's meticulously manicured rose garden next door. Sometimes, he'd exchange a wave with Mr. Peterson, his neighbor across the street, who was often out retrieving his USA Today newspaper. Breakfast was always the same. A bowl of Quaker Oats oatmeal with a sliced banana and a handful of blueberries. He'd sit at his kitchen table, a sturdy oak piece he'd bought at a Raymore and Flanagan furniture sale years ago, and read the physical copy of the Maple Creek Gazette. He preferred the tactile experience of turning pages to the glowing screen of a tablet. The local news, community events, the high school football scores, these were the stories that anchored him to his immediate world, far more relevant than the global financial headlines he used to pore over. By 7:30 a.m., dressed in comfortable athletic wear, usually Champion brand sweats, Arthur would be out the door for his morning walk. His destination was Maple Creek Park, a sprawling green space just a few blocks from his home. The park was a vibrant hub of local life. Joggers pounding the paved paths, dog walkers enjoying the off-leash area, and young parents pushing strollers. Arthur would walk the full 2-mile loop, greeting familiar faces with a nod or a brief chat. He knew many of the regulars: Sarah, the retired school teacher who always walked her golden retriever, Buddy, Tom, the postal worker who used his lunch break for a quick jog, and the group of elderly gentlemen who gathered by the pond to feed the ducks. These small, genuine interactions were the fabric of his day, far more enriching than the formal networking events he once attended. After his walk, Arthur didn't head to a corporate office or a private jet. Instead, 3 times a week, he drove his Honda Civic to the Maple Creek Community Hub, a bustling center that offered everything from adult education classes to youth mentorship programs. Arthur volunteered his time there, not as a wealthy benefactor, but as a humble mentor for aspiring small business owners. He'd sit in a small, slightly worn office, offering advice on everything from crafting a business plan to navigating local permits. He never revealed his past as a tech titan, he simply introduced himself as Arthur, a retired consultant with some experience. Today, his first mentor was Maria Rodriguez, a young woman with fiery determination and a dream of opening a local bakery, Maria's Sweet Delights. Maria was struggling with her initial capital projections. Arthur patiently walked her through a spreadsheet on his old Dell laptop, explaining concepts like cash flow and break-even points, drawing on his vast, yet unmentioned, experience. He didn't just give advice, he listened, truly listened, to Maria's anxieties and aspirations. He even suggested she look into the Small Business Administration, SBA, for potential grants, something he'd learned about during his own early struggles. "This is so much clearer now, Arthur," Maria said, her face lighting up. "Thank you. I was so overwhelmed." Arthur smiled. "That's what we're here for, Maria. Every big business started small. Just keep at it." Lunch was a simple affair. Sometimes, he'd bring a brown bag lunch, a turkey sandwich on whole wheat bread with Hellmann's mayonnaise, an apple, and a thermos of iced tea. Other days, he'd walk to Peggy's Diner, a local institution known for its greasy spoon charm and friendly waitstaff. Peggy, a no-nonsense woman with a beehive hairdo and a heart of gold, always knew his order: the daily special, no substitutions, and a glass of unsweetened iced tea. He'd sit at the counter, listening to the local gossip, occasionally chiming in with a quiet observation. He wasn't there to be seen, he was there to be a part of the everyday rhythm of Maple Creek. This afternoon, after his session with Maria, Arthur decided to spend some time at the Maple Creek Public Library. He wasn't there for the internet access or the latest bestsellers. He was there for the quiet, the smell of old paper, and the opportunity to delve into nonfiction. Today, he was researching sustainable farming practices, a topic that had recently piqued his interest. He'd sit at a large oak table, surrounded by students, retirees, and young mothers, all lost in their own worlds of knowledge. He found a particular fascination in a book published by Rodale Institute, taking notes in a small notebook. Later, he might engage in one of his simple hobbies. He had a small vegetable patch in his backyard, where he grew tomatoes, zucchini, and herbs. He found immense satisfaction in tending to the plants, feeling the soil between his fingers, and watching life sprout from the earth. It was a stark contrast to the abstract world of data and algorithms he once inhabited. Or, he might visit his elderly neighbor, Mrs. Beatrice Holloway, a spry 88-year-old who loved a good game of chess. Arthur wasn't a grandmaster, but he enjoyed the quiet challenge and Mrs. Holloway's sharp wit. They'd play on a worn wooden board, sipping on instant coffee from Folgers and chatting about the weather or the latest neighborhood news. Evenings were equally unadorned. Arthur would cook dinner at home, often using the ingredients he'd picked up from Food Mart. Tonight, it was the kale and chicken stir-fry. He enjoyed the process of cooking, the chopping, the sizzling, the blending of flavors. He'd eat at his kitchen table, sometimes listening to classical music on his old Sony stereo system, other times simply enjoying the silence. There were no elaborate dinner parties, no private chefs, no reservations at Michelin-starred restaurants. Just good, simple food, prepared with care. After dinner, he might spend an hour reading a book, currently, a historical fiction novel by Ken Follett he'd borrowed from the library. Or he might call his longtime friend, Mark Jensen, his college roommate from Purdue. Mark, a successful but equally down-to-earth architect living in Boulder, Colorado, was one of the few people who knew the full extent of Arthur's wealth and his chosen lifestyle. Their conversations were never about stocks or investments, but about life, family, and shared memories. Still sticking to the simple life, Art. Mark would tease, good-naturedly. Wouldn't have it any other way, Mark, Arthur would reply, a genuine contentment in his voice. It's where the real living happens. Before bed, Arthur would often sit in his living room, looking out at the quiet street. The streetlights cast a soft glow, illuminating the familiar houses. He felt a profound sense of peace, a feeling that had uneluded him during the years he was chasing success. His life was full, not with possessions, but with purpose, connection, and the quiet joy of everyday existence. The absence of extravagance wasn't a sacrifice, it was a deliberate choice, a liberation. If you're finding inspiration in Arthur's simple routine, remember to like this story, subscribe for more insights into his life, comment on what simple pleasure you cherish most, and share this story to spread the message of contentment. Arthur Finch wasn't born into wealth. His story began in Springfield, Illinois, a city steeped in history but otherwise unremarkable. His father, Robert Finch, worked as an accountant for a local manufacturing company, Prairie Steel, and his mother, Susan, was a beloved elementary school teacher at Lincoln Elementary. They were a quintessential middle-class family, instilling in Arthur the values of hard work, integrity, and the importance of education. From a young age, Arthur displayed a keen intellect and an insatiable curiosity, particularly for technology. He spent countless hours in his bedroom, hunched over his first computer, an old Commodore 64, teaching himself to code. While other kids were outside playing baseball, Arthur was dissecting software, building rudimentary programs, and dreaming of a future where technology could solve real-world problems. His parents, though not tech-savvy themselves, encouraged his passion, buying him books on programming and even enrolling him in a summer computer camp at the local community college. His academic prowess earned him a scholarship to Purdue University in West Lafayette, Indiana, where he majored in computer science. It was there that he met Mark Jensen, his roommate, a boisterous and creative architecture student who became his lifelong friend. It was also at Purdue that Arthur's vision began to crystallize. He saw the inefficiencies in various industries, particularly healthcare, where data was siloed, fragmented, and underutilized. He envisioned a system that could seamlessly integrate patient information, improve diagnostics, and ultimately save lives. After graduating with honors, Arthur didn't immediately jump into a high-paying corporate job. Instead, he spent several years working for smaller tech firms in Chicago, honing his skills and observing the industry from the inside. He learned about venture capital, intellectual property, and the brutal realities of startup culture. During this time, he met Dr. Evelyn Reed, a brilliant but eccentric data scientist with a PhD from MIT, who was disillusioned with the slow pace of innovation in traditional medical research. Evelyn shared Arthur's vision for a more integrated healthcare data system, but her approach was purely theoretical. Arthur, with his practical coding skills and business acumen, knew how to build it. In 2002, with little more than a shared vision, a borrowed garage in a quiet Chicago suburb, and a handful of maxed-out credit cards, Arthur and Evelyn founded Quantum Innovations. Their initial capital was meager, scraped together from personal savings and small loans from supportive family members. Their first few years were a relentless grind. They worked 18-hour days, fueled by cheap coffee from Dunkin' Donuts and late-night pizza from Lou Malnati's. They faced rejection after rejection from venture capitalists who deemed their idea too niche or too ambitious. "Arthur, are we crazy?" Evelyn once asked him, staring at a stack of rejection letters. "Maybe this is just a pipe dream." Arthur, ever the optimist, just smiled. "No, Evelyn. It's a revolution waiting to happen. We just need one person to believe." That one person came in the form of Mr. Harrison Thorne, a shrewd but surprisingly insightful venture capitalist from Silicon Valley. Thorne, a partner at Ascendant Capital, had a reputation for spotting disruptive technologies before anyone else. He flew to Chicago, met Arthur and Evelyn in their cramped, makeshift office, and listened intently to their pitch. He saw not just the technology, but the passion and dedication behind it. After a grueling 5-hour meeting, Thorne made them an offer. It wasn't a blank check, but it was enough to rent a proper office space in downtown Chicago, hire a small team of engineers, and develop their prototype. With Ascendant Capital's investment, Quantum Innovations began to flourish. They developed a proprietary algorithm that could synthesize vast amounts of disparate healthcare data, from patient records and lab results to clinical trials and genomic sequencing, into actionable insights. Their first major client was Mercy Hospital System in Illinois, followed by Kaiser Permanente in California. Their technology helped doctors identify disease patterns earlier, personalize treatment plans, and reduce medical errors. The impact was tangible, and the company's reputation soared. By 2018, Quantum Innovations was a powerhouse. They had expanded globally, with offices in London, Tokyo, and Berlin. Major pharmaceutical companies like Pfizer and Johnson & Johnson were using their platform for drug discovery. The whispers of an initial public offering, IPO, turned into a roar. But before they could go public, a massive tech conglomerate, Omnicorp, known for its aggressive acquisitions and vast digital empire, came calling. Omnicorp saw Quantum Innovations as the missing piece in their healthcare technology portfolio. The acquisition negotiations were intense, lasting months. Arthur, as CEO, led the charge, often working late into the night with his legal team from Skadden ARPs. The final offer was astronomical. A multi-billion-dollar deal that would make Arthur Finch, Evelyn Reed, and their early investors fabulously wealthy. The day the deal closed, Arthur sat in his modest Chicago apartment, staring at the news headlines proclaiming his newfound billionaire status. He felt nothing. Or rather, a profound emptiness. The initial aftermath was a blur of forced celebration. He bought a sprawling penthouse overlooking Lake Michigan, a Tesla Model S, and a wardrobe full of designer suits from Armani. He attended exclusive parties, rubbed shoulders with celebrities and titans of industry, and dined at the most expensive restaurants in New York City. He even tried a luxury vacation, a private yacht charter in the Mediterranean. But each experience felt hollow, devoid of genuine joy. The penthouse felt too big, the car too flashy, the clothes too stiff. The conversations at parties were superficial, centered on wealth and status. He missed the late-night coding sessions, the camaraderie with his team, the feeling of building something meaningful. This period of immense wealth brought with it a new set of challenges, particularly from his extended family. His younger sister, Eleanor "Ellie" Finch, had always been more focused on appearances and social climbing. Married to Richard "Rick" Vance, a real estate developer with a penchant for flashy cars and questionable investments, Ellie saw Arthur's newfound fortune as a personal windfall for the entire family. Before the Omnicorp acquisition, Ellie and Rick Vance had been moderately successful, living comfortably in a McMansion in the affluent Chicago suburb of Naperville. But after Arthur became a billionaire, their expectations skyrocketed. Calls from Ellie, once infrequent and genuinely familial, now became regular demands. "Arthur, darling, you simply must see this property Rick found in Aspen," Ellie would gush over the phone, her voice dripping with thinly veiled expectation. "It's perfect for a family retreat. Imagine, Christmas in the Rockies. Of course, it's a bit pricey, but for you." Rick Vance, even more brazen, would often call with investment opportunities that were thinly disguised pleas for capital. "Art, my man. I've got this incredible deal on a commercial complex in Scottsdale. Needs a little kickstart, but the returns are astronomical. A few million from your pocket would make it happen, easy peasy." Arthur, with his sharp business acumen, could see through Rick's schemes, recognizing them as high-risk ventures designed more to prop up Rick's failing enterprises than to generate legitimate returns. He politely but firmly declined, which only fueled Ellie's resentment. Their children, Arthur's niece and nephew, Chloe and Brandon, quickly adopted their parents' sense of entitlement. Chloe, a freshman at USC, would call Arthur not to chat about her studies, but to complain about her outdated designer bags or the need for a new Mercedes-Benz C-Class, because her friends all had better cars. Brandon, still in high school, openly boasted to his friends that his Uncle Art was a billionaire and would one day buy him a private jet. Arthur tried to guide them, to instill the values his parents had taught him, but his words seemed to fall on deaf ears, drowned out by the siren song of inherited wealth. "Honestly, Arthur," Ellie once snapped during a strained family dinner at a high-end Chicago restaurant, "why are you still driving that ancient Honda? It's an embarrassment. And that apartment, it's barely bigger than our guest house. People are talking. It reflects poorly on us." Arthur had simply taken a sip of his Fiji water, his gaze steady. "Ellie, I'm comfortable. And I don't particularly care what people are talking about." The constant pressure, the thinly veiled greed, and the superficiality of these interactions chipped away at Arthur's peace of mind. He saw how wealth could corrupt, not just those who acquired it, but those who merely orbited it. It became another layer of disillusionment, adding to the emptiness he felt despite his immense fortune. He began to question the very fabric of the life he had built, a life that seemed to attract only those who sought to benefit from his success, rather than genuinely connect with him. The turning point came during that Mediterranean trip. He was alone on the deck of the yacht, a magnificent Azimuth 80 chartered from a luxury firm in Monaco, watching the sunset over the sparkling water. It was beautiful, undeniably. The air was warm, the sea calm, and the distant lights of the French Riviera twinkled like scattered diamonds. He was sipping a glass of rare Chateau Lafite Rothschild from a crystal goblet. Yet, he felt utterly isolated. The grandeur felt oppressive, the silence deafening. He remembered a simple camping trip he'd taken with Mark in the Appalachian Mountains years ago, where they'd cooked hot dogs over an open fire, shared stories under a canopy of stars, and laughed until their sides hurt. That memory, simple and unadorned, held more warmth and happiness than all the luxury surrounding him. He realized that material wealth, while providing comfort, had become a gilded cage, separating him from the very things that truly mattered: connection, purpose, and genuine human experience. The profound emptiness Arthur felt on that yacht was merely the prelude to the true catalyst for his transformation. The next morning, as the Azimuth 80 was cruising towards the Italian coast, the azure sky turned an ominous gray. A sudden, violent squall, unpredicted by the local forecasts, descended upon the Ligurian Sea. The yacht, designed for leisurely cruises, was ill-equipped for such a tempest. Waves, towering like liquid mountains, crashed over the bow, sending spray high into the air. The captain, a seasoned but visibly shaken Italian man named Marco, struggled to maintain control. Arthur, who had been reading a financial report in the main salon, was thrown from his seat as the yacht pitched violently. Alarms blared, and the crew scrambled, their faces etched with fear. One moment, Arthur was bracing himself against a bulkhead; the next, a rogue wave slammed into the side of the yacht, sending a cascade of water through a faulty seal in a porthole. The impact was so severe that a heavy piece of decorative art, a bronze sculpture, broke free from its mooring and swung wildly, striking Arthur on the head. He collapsed, a sharp pain exploding behind his eyes. The last thing he saw before darkness consumed him was the terrified face of a young deckhand trying to reach him, battling against the violent lurching of the vessel. He awoke in a sterile, white room, the rhythmic beeping of medical machinery his only companion. The air smelled of antiseptic. He was in a hospital, Ospedale Santa Corona, in Pietra Ligure, Italy. A nurse, a kind-faced woman with tired eyes, explained in broken English that he had suffered a severe concussion and several broken ribs. The yacht had barely made it to port, severely damaged, and he had been airlifted by the Italian Coast Guard. The days that followed were a blur of pain, medication, and forced introspection. Lying in that hospital bed, stripped of all his luxuries, his designer clothes replaced by a flimsy hospital gown, Arthur felt utterly vulnerable. His wealth meant nothing here. The nurses treated him with the same professional care they extended to every patient, rich or poor. The doctors spoke to him in medical terms, not deferential tones. He was just another human being, fragile and dependent. His phone, miraculously, had survived, albeit cracked. He managed to call Evelyn Reed, his co-founder, who immediately arranged for a private medical jet to transfer him to a top hospital in New York City, New York Presbyterian Hospital. But before that, he had to endure a visit from his sister, Ellie, and her husband, Rick. They arrived looking disheveled, their faces a mixture of concern and thinly veiled exasperation. "Arthur, thank God you're alive!" Ellie exclaimed, rushing to his bedside, though her eyes seemed to scan the room more for signs of luxury than genuine relief. "We were so worried. The news reports were dreadful. A billionaire's yacht caught in a storm, everyone thought the worst." Rick, ever the opportunist, chimed in. "Seriously, Art, what were you thinking? Cruising on an Azimuth 80 in that kind of weather? You need a proper super yacht, something with advanced weather systems, maybe a Lursen or a Fedship. I know a guy who can get you a deal." Arthur, still groggy from medication, simply stared at them. He had almost died. He had faced the raw, indiscriminate power of nature. And their first thought was about the inadequacy of his yacht, or the potential for a deal on a new one. There was no genuine concern for his well-being, no reflection on the fragility of life, only a relentless focus on the material. It was a stark, horrifying realization. Their visit, meant to be comforting, was instead a jarring confirmation of his deepest fears about the corrosive nature of his wealth on those around him. He was transferred to New York, where he spent weeks recovering. During this time, he had ample opportunity to reflect. The storm, the injury, and especially his family's reaction, served as a brutal awakening. He saw his life, the one he had meticulously built, as a grand, empty edifice. The penthouse, the parties, the constant striving for more, it was all a distraction, a desperate attempt to fill a void that only grew larger with each acquisition. He realized that the pursuit of wealth had not only isolated him but had also attracted people who valued him only for what he possessed, not for who he was. The storm had stripped him bare, physically and metaphorically, revealing the hollowness at the core of his existence. He remembered a conversation with his mother, Susan, years ago, when he was just starting quantum innovations. "Arthur," she had said, "remember that true success isn't about how much you have, but about how much good you do, and how much joy you find in the simple things." At the time, he had dismissed it as quaint, old-fashioned wisdom. Now, lying in a hospital bed, it resonated with a profound truth. His recovery was slow, but his resolve was swift and absolute. He decided then and there that he would dismantle the gilded cage he had built around himself. He would shed the excess, not as a sacrifice, but as a liberation. He would seek a life of purpose, connection, and genuine fulfillment, far away from the superficiality that had almost cost him his life. This was the fated moment, the brutal, beautiful turning point that set Arthur Finch on the path to Maple Creek, Ohio, and the quiet, extraordinary life he now led. If you're gripped by this pivotal moment, please like this story, subscribe to see how his transformation unfolds, comment on what moments have shaped your perspective, and share this story with someone who needs a reminder of what truly matters. Arthur's recovery at New York Presbyterian Hospital was meticulously managed by a team of specialists, but his true healing began not with physical therapy, but with a series of phone calls and directives that would fundamentally reshape his life. From his hospital bed, he began the deliberate unraveling of his opulent existence. His first call was to his legal team at Skadden ARPs, specifically to his lead attorney, Mr. David Chen, a sharp, no-nonsense corporate lawyer who had handled the Omnicorp acquisition. "David," Arthur's voice was firm, devoid of the usual executive urgency, "I need you to begin the process of establishing a philanthropic trust. A significant one." Chen, accustomed to Arthur's ambitious directives, was still taken aback by the scale. "Mr. Finch, significant, is a relative term. Are we talking hundreds of millions? A billion?" "No, David," Arthur replied, his gaze fixed on the sterile white ceiling. "The vast majority. 95% of my liquid assets, to start. The Finch Philanthropic Trust will focus on healthcare innovation, education, and sustainable living initiatives. I want Evelyn Reed and Harrison Thorne on the board. They understand the vision." Chen, a veteran of countless high-stakes deals, had never encountered such a request. Most of his clients were focused on maximizing their fortunes, not divesting them. "Mr. Finch, are you certain? This is unprecedented." "I am absolutely certain, David. My life almost ended on that yacht. I've had a profound change in perspective. This wealth needs to serve a greater purpose than accumulating more things." The legal process was complex and lengthy, involving financial advisors from Goldman Sachs and philanthropic consultants from Giving Architects. Arthur insisted on transparency and strict ethical guidelines for the trust. He wanted to ensure that his wealth would genuinely make a difference, not just sit in offshore accounts. While the trust was being established, Arthur began the process of shedding his personal excesses. The sprawling penthouse on Michigan Avenue, a monument to his former aspirations, was put on the market. He instructed his real estate agent, Mrs. Dorothy Jenkins, a high-end broker from Sotheby's International Realty, to sell it quickly, even if it meant a slight discount. The Tesla Model S, a symbol of his brief foray into luxury vehicles, was sold to a dealership in downtown Chicago. His wardrobe, filled with custom-tailored suits from Brooks Brothers and Armani, along with designer watches from Rolex and Patek Philippe, was either donated to charity or sold through consignment shops. He kept only a few practical, well-made pieces of clothing and a simple Timex watch. His family's reaction to these changes was, predictably, one of disbelief and outrage. Ellie called him incessantly, her voice oscillating between panicked concern and furious indignation. "Arthur, what are you doing?" she shrieked over the phone one afternoon, her voice echoing in his hospital room. "Selling the penthouse? The Tesla? Are you out of your mind? Rick says you're having a breakdown. People are saying you've gone completely mad." "Ellie," Arthur said calmly, "I'm making choices that are right for me. I'm simplifying my life." "Simplifying? You're giving away billions." "Billions, Arthur. Do you know what that means for us? For Chloe and Brandon? Their inheritance. You're ruining everything." Her voice cracked with genuine anger, not concern for his mental state, but for her perceived loss of future wealth. Rick joined in, his tone more aggressive. "Art, this is a colossal mistake. You worked your whole life for this. You're throwing it all away. Think about the legacy. Think about the power you're relinquishing." Arthur felt a strange sense of detachment. Their words, once capable of causing him stress, now simply highlighted the chasm between their values and his own. "My legacy will be in what the trust achieves, Rick, not in the size of my bank account. And the power I'm relinquishing is the power money had over me." He ended the call, feeling a profound sense of liberation. The less he had, the less they could demand. Once discharged from the hospital, Arthur didn't return to Chicago. Instead, he took a train, an Amtrak sleeper car, to Maple Creek, Ohio. He had visited the town years ago for a brief business conference and remembered its quiet charm, its tree-lined streets, and its strong sense of community. It felt like a world away from the relentless pace and superficiality of Chicago and New York. He found the house on Elm Street through a local real estate agent, Mrs. Dorothy Jenkins, a friendly woman who seemed genuinely surprised by his lack of specific demands beyond a comfortable, modest home. He furnished it simply, with pieces from local furniture stores like Ashley Home Store, and even some finds from Goodwill. He didn't want anything grand, just functional and cozy. His move to Maple Creek was a deliberate act of anonymity. He didn't tell anyone about his past wealth, not his new neighbors, not the people at Food Mart, not even the staff at the Maple Creek Community Hub where he began volunteering. He was simply Arthur Finch, a retired consultant looking for a quiet life. This anonymity was a shield, protecting him from the demands and expectations that had plagued him in his former life. It allowed him to forge genuine connections, based on shared interests and mutual respect, rather than on his financial status. The transformation wasn't instantaneous. There were moments of adjustment, moments where the old habits of luxury tried to creep back in. He'd occasionally catch himself reaching for his phone to check stock prices, or thinking about a first-class flight to a distant destination. But each time, he would consciously redirect his thoughts, focusing instead on the simple pleasures of his new life. The taste of his home-brewed coffee, the warmth of the sun on his face during his morning walk, the satisfaction of helping Maria with her bakery plans. The quiet life, he realized, was not a default setting, but a conscious, daily practice, a continuous choice to prioritize peace over pretense, and genuine connection over superficial gain. Arthur's transformation wasn't confined to his new home in Maple Creek. A crucial part of his journey involved a series of incognito travels, deliberate excursions into worlds far removed from his former gilded cage. These were not luxury vacations, but immersive experiences designed to broaden his perspective, challenge his assumptions, and reinforce his commitment to simplicity. He wanted to see life from the ground up, to understand the struggles and triumphs of ordinary people, unburdened by the distorting lens of his immense wealth. His first such journey began just a few months after settling in Maple Creek. He packed a single backpack, a durable, Osprey model, with basic necessities, a few changes of clothes, a well-worn copy of Walden by Henry David Thoreau, and a small amount of cash. He left his Honda Civic in his garage and bought a Greyhound bus ticket from Columbus, Ohio, to El Paso, Texas. The bus, a far cry from his private jet, was a microcosm of America. Families traveling on tight budgets, migrant workers heading to new opportunities, students on a gap year. He sat next to a young woman named Sophia, who was traveling from Detroit to visit her ailing grandmother in Arizona. She shared stories of her struggles to put herself through nursing school at Wayne State University, working 2 part-time jobs at Starbucks and Target. Arthur listened intently, offering quiet encouragement, struck by her resilience and unwavering optimism despite her hardships. He bought her a coffee and a sandwich from a roadside diner during a stop, a small gesture that brought a genuine smile to her tired face. In El Paso, instead of checking into a 5-star hotel, he found a modest, independently owned motel called the Desert Rose Inn. For 2 weeks, he volunteered at a local food bank, El Pasoans Fighting Hunger. He spent his days sorting donated cans of Campbell's soup, packing boxes of fresh produce, and distributing meals to families in need. He worked alongside dedicated volunteers and met countless individuals who, despite facing immense economic challenges, displayed incredible dignity and kindness. He saw families sharing what little they had, neighbors helping neighbors, and a community spirit that was palpable. He learned about the complexities of food insecurity, the bureaucratic hurdles many faced, and the sheer grit required to survive on the margins. One afternoon, he helped an elderly woman, Maria Elena, carry her box of groceries to her worn Ford F-150 pickup truck. She thanked him profusely, her eyes welling up with tears. "God bless you, son," she whispered. That simple blessing, from a woman who had so little, felt more profound than any standing ovation he'd ever received in a boardroom. His next, incognito, venture took him to the rural farmlands of Iowa. He found a temporary job through a local agricultural agency, working as a farmhand on a small, family-owned corn and soybean farm, Miller Family Farms, near Ames. He lived in a small, rustic cabin on the property, waking before dawn to the crow of roosters. His days were spent driving tractors, mending fences, and helping with the harvest, his hands calloused and aching by the end of each day. He learned about the unpredictable nature of farming, the constant worry about weather, crop prices, and global markets. He ate hearty, simple meals with the Miller family, John and Sarah, and their 2 teenage children, Emily and David, around their kitchen table, discussing crop rotations and the price of John Deere equipment. They were hard-working, salt-of-the-earth people, deeply connected to the land and to each other. He saw their quiet pride in their harvest, their resilience in the face of adversity, and their unwavering commitment to their family legacy. He realized that true wealth wasn't just about financial assets, but about the rich tapestry of a life built on hard work, community, and a deep connection to something tangible. Another journey led him to the bustling streets of New Orleans, Louisiana. He rented a small room in the historic French Quarter and spent his days volunteering at a community music school, the Crescent City Sound Project, which provided free music lessons to underprivileged youth. He wasn't a musician, but he helped with administrative tasks, organized instruments, and even tutored some of the younger students in basic math. He was captivated by the vibrant culture, the soulful jazz pouring from every doorway, and the indomitable spirit of the city. Arthur spent hours listening to Jamal practice, offering encouragement, and even quietly researching scholarship opportunities for him, without revealing his own financial capacity. He saw how art and community could uplift spirits, provide hope, and create opportunities where none seemed to exist. The sheer joy on Jamal's face when he mastered a difficult piece of music was a reminder that true achievement often had nothing to do with money. These journeys, far from being a hardship, became deeply fulfilling. They were a stark contrast to his past luxury trips, which had often left him feeling isolated and uninspired. He wasn't a tourist, he was a participant, a learner, an observer. He saw the kindness of strangers, the resilience of the human spirit, and the quiet dignity of lives lived outside the spotlight of immense wealth. He realized that the world was full of riches that couldn't be bought, the warmth of human connection, the satisfaction of honest labor, the beauty of shared experiences, and the simple joy of contributing to something larger than oneself. Each encounter, each new perspective, solidified his conviction that his decision to embrace simplicity was not a retreat, but an advance into a richer, more meaningful existence. If you're inspired by his quest for deeper understanding, please like this story, subscribe for more profound insights, comment on what experiences have changed your perspective, and share this story to encourage others to look beyond the surface. Arthur's quiet life in Maple Creek, and his incognito journeys, had ripple effects far beyond his immediate circle, often without him even realizing it. His deliberate choice to live simply, to engage authentically, and to contribute without fanfare, subtly influenced those around him, creating small pockets of positive change in a world often obsessed with grandeur. One such ripple reached Maria Rodriguez, his mentee at the Maple Creek Community Hub. Maria, with Arthur's guidance, successfully secured a small business loan from Fifth Third Bank and opened Maria's Sweet Delights in a quaint storefront downtown. Her bakery, specializing in artisanal pastries and locally sourced coffee from Crimson Cup Coffee and Tea, quickly became a beloved local spot. Maria often thought of Arthur's calm demeanor and practical advice. She found herself adopting his understated approach, focusing on quality and community rather than rapid expansion or flashy marketing. She started offering free baking workshops for local teenagers, inspired by Arthur's mentorship, passing on the knowledge she had gained. She even began sourcing some of her fresh produce, like berries for her tarts, from small local farms, including, unknowingly, a few items from the Miller family farms, thanks to a new regional distribution network. Arthur taught me that true success isn't about how much money you make, but how much good you do and how much joy you find in the process, Maria once told a reporter from the Maple Creek Chronicle, who was doing a feature on local entrepreneurs. He's just a retired consultant, but his wisdom is worth more than gold. The Miller family in Iowa also felt an unseen impact. Arthur, during his time as a farmhand, had subtly suggested a few minor operational efficiencies and sustainable farming techniques he'd researched at the library. He didn't push, just offered observations. John Miller, initially skeptical of the city slicker, had grudgingly tried a few of Arthur's suggestions, like implementing a more precise crop rotation schedule and exploring cover cropping. To his surprise, these changes led to a slight increase in yield and a noticeable improvement in soil health. He even started looking into renewable energy options for the farm, a concept Arthur had briefly mentioned. The Miller family, unknowingly, benefited from the quiet wisdom of a former tech billionaire. Even the elderly Mrs. Beatrice Holloway, Arthur's chess partner, found her life subtly enriched. Their weekly chess games became a highlight of her week. Arthur's patient listening and genuine interest in her stories, her memories of Maple Creek through the decades, filled a void that her busy children, living in distant cities, couldn't. She often shared his quiet observations with her bridge club friends at the Maple Creek Senior Center. Arthur, bless his heart, he just has a way of seeing the simple beauty in things, she'd say, makes you appreciate what you've got. Meanwhile, Arthur's former world continued to churn, largely oblivious to his quiet transformation. Ellie and Rick Vance, still reeling from Arthur's betrayal of their perceived inheritance, found themselves in increasingly dire financial straits. Rick's speculative real estate ventures, without Arthur's kickstart, began to crumble. A major commercial development in Phoenix, Arizona, that Rick had heavily invested in, collapsed due to zoning issues and a sudden downturn in the market. Their McMansion in Naperville, once a symbol of their aspiration, became a burden. They were forced to downsize, moving to a smaller, less prestigious home in a different suburb. Chloe and Brandon, cut off from their Uncle Art's seemingly endless supply of funds, faced a harsh reality check. Chloe struggled to maintain her lavish lifestyle at USC, eventually dropping out due to mounting debt and a lack of academic focus. Brandon, after a series of minor legal troubles related to reckless spending and a disregard for rules, was sent to a military academy by his exasperated parents, a stark contrast to the private jet he once envisioned. Their lives, once seemingly destined for effortless luxury, were now marred by the consequences of entitlement and a lack of genuine purpose. Arthur, though saddened by their struggles, knew he had made the right choice. He had offered guidance, but ultimately, they had to learn their own lessons. He sometimes wondered if, in their hardship, they might eventually find their own path to genuine values, just as he had. Arthur, however, remained steadfast in his chosen path. He found a deep, abiding satisfaction in his everyday life. He wasn't seeking recognition or applause. His joy came from the quiet satisfaction of a well-tended garden, the warmth of a shared laugh, the feeling of contributing to his community, and the profound peace that came from living authentically. He had traded the fleeting thrill of acquisition for the enduring richness of being. His life was a testament to the idea that the greatest treasures are often hidden in plain sight, waiting to be discovered by those willing to look beyond the glittering distractions of the material world. If you're inspired by the unseen ripples of his life, please like this story, subscribe for more profound narratives, comment on how small actions can create big change, and share this story to spread the message of quiet impact. Arthur Finch's life in Maple Creek wasn't just about avoiding extravagance or managing a philanthropic empire from afar, it was about actively cultivating joy in the mundane. Each day brought small affirmations that he was on the right path, reinforcing his conviction that true richness lay not in grand gestures, but in the quiet beauty of everyday existence. His morning routine, once a strict regimen for maximizing productivity, was now a deliberate practice of mindfulness. The aroma of his 8 o'clock coffee is no longer just a caffeine kick, it is a moment of sensory pleasure. The warmth of the mug in his hands, the steam rising, the quiet hum of the refrigerator, these are small anchors in his day. His walks in Maple Creek Park became a form of moving meditation. He noticed the changing seasons, the vibrant golds and reds of autumn leaves from the maple trees, the delicate snowfalls of winter, the burst of green in spring. He observed the wildlife, the busy squirrels burying nuts, the graceful flight of a blue jay, the playful antics of a family of ducks in the pond. These observations, once overlooked in his hurried life, now brought him a deep sense of connection to the natural world. His interactions with the community were equally affirming. Brenda at Food Mart would often tell him about her grandchildren's latest achievements, and Arthur would listen with genuine interest, offering a kind word or a small piece of advice. Kevin, the tired cashier, once confided in Arthur about his struggles with a difficult calculus class at Ohio State University Extension campus. Arthur, remembering his own early academic challenges, spent a few minutes explaining a complex concept, drawing diagrams on a napkin. A week later, Kevin, beaming, told him he'd aced his midterm. "You really helped me, Mr. Finch," he said, "you just explained it differently." Arthur felt a quiet satisfaction that transcended any corporate bonus. Maria's Sweet Delights, the bakery he had helped launch, became a regular stop. He'd buy a simple croissant and a cup of black coffee, sitting at a small table by the window, watching the town wake up. Maria would often come out from the kitchen, flour dusting her apron, to chat with him. She shared her successes, a catering order for the Maple Creek High School prom, a glowing review in a regional food blog, and her challenges. Arthur offered quiet encouragement, a steady presence amidst the daily anxieties of a small business owner. He saw her dream, nurtured by his quiet guidance, blossom into a thriving reality. His chess games with Mrs. Beatrice Holloway continued, becoming a cherished ritual. Mrs. Holloway, with her sharp mind and even sharper wit, often provided unexpected insights. One afternoon, after Arthur had made a particularly clever move, she leaned back, a twinkle in her eye. "You know, Arthur," she said, "life's a lot like chess. You can have all the pieces, all the power, but if you don't know how to use them wisely, or if you're too focused on just one piece, you'll lose the whole game." Arthur smiled, realizing she had, perhaps unknowingly, perfectly articulated his own journey. Even the simple act of tending his garden brought him immense joy. He found a profound connection to the earth, to the cycle of growth and decay. He learned patience from waiting for his tomatoes to ripen, resilience from battling garden pests, and humility from the sheer power of nature. He wasn't just growing vegetables. He was cultivating a sense of peace, a grounding in the tangible world that had been absent in his abstract, digital existence. These daily affirmations, small and seemingly insignificant, built upon each other, creating a profound sense of contentment. He no longer yearned for the grandiosity of his past life. The quiet hum of his Honda Civic, the familiar aisles of Food Mart, the friendly faces of Maple Creek, these were the true luxuries. He had found a wealth that couldn't be measured in bank accounts or market caps, a wealth of connection, purpose, and genuine human experience. His life, once a frantic race to the top, was now a peaceful journey, lived deliberately, authentically, and with a profound sense of gratitude for the simple joys that surrounded him. If you're inspired by his appreciation for the little things, please like this story, subscribe for more insights into a life well lived, comment on what simple joys enrich your day, and share this story to spread the message of contentment. Despite Arthur's fervent desire for anonymity, the world, in its own way, sometimes finds a way to acknowledge true impact. Years had passed since Arthur moved to Maple Creek. The Finch Philanthropic Trust had grown exponentially, its initiatives transforming lives on a global scale. Evelyn Reed, as CEO, had become a respected figure in philanthropy, often fielding questions about the mysterious Mr. Finch, who had endowed such a remarkable organization. One spring evening, Arthur received a call from Evelyn. Her voice was tinged with excitement and a hint of trepidation. "Arthur, I have something important to discuss. The Global Health Initiative is presenting its Humanitarian Visionary Award this year. And they want to give it to you." Arthur paused, the silence stretching across the phone line. "Evelyn, you know my stance on this. I prefer to remain anonymous." "I know, Arthur, and I've fought for it fiercely," she replied. "But this is different. They've done their research. They know about quantum innovations, about the acquisition, about the scale of the trust. They don't know your current whereabouts or how you live, but they've connected the dots. They say your story, the journey from immense wealth to profound philanthropy and a life of simplicity, is as inspiring as the trust's work itself. They believe it will amplify the message of purposeful giving exponentially." Arthur felt a familiar knot of discomfort. The spotlight was precisely what he had sought to avoid. But Evelyn continued, her voice earnest. "Arthur, think of the impact. Not for you, but for the message. For all the people who are struggling to find meaning in a world obsessed with material gain. Your personal story, combined with the trust's work, could be a powerful catalyst for change." He spent days wrestling with the decision. He consulted with Mark, who, after much thought, agreed with Evelyn. Mark said, "You've lived your truth. Maybe it's time for that truth to inspire others on a larger scale. You're not doing it for ego. You're doing it for the message." Finally, Arthur agreed, but with strict conditions: no personal interviews about his current life, no media circus at his home, and the focus of the award ceremony must be on the trust's work and the broader message of purposeful living, not on his personal fortune. The Global Health Initiative, eager to secure his presence, agreed to his terms. The award ceremony was held in a grand ballroom at the Waldorf Astoria, in New York City. Arthur, dressed in a simple, well-tailored dark suit he had purchased from J. Crew for the occasion, felt a slight tremor of nervousness as he walked onto the stage. The room was filled with dignitaries, philanthropists, and media representatives from the New York Times, the Wall Street Journal, and CNN. Evelyn Reed gave a moving introduction, highlighting the trust's achievements and subtly alluding to the founder's unique journey. When Arthur stepped to the podium, the applause was thunderous. He looked out at the sea of faces, a mix of curiosity, admiration, and perhaps, a hint of skepticism. He didn't speak about his billions, or the yacht, or the penthouse. He spoke about the profound emptiness he had felt at the peak of his material success. He spoke about the storm, not as a tragedy, but as a crucible that had forged a new path. He spoke about Sophia, the Miller family, and Jamal, the young trumpet player, emphasizing the lessons he had learned from their resilience and kindness. He spoke about the joy of simple connections, the satisfaction of contributing, and the enduring power of human spirit. "I stand before you today," Arthur concluded, his voice clear and resonant, not as a titan of industry, but as a man who found true wealth not in what he accumulated, but in what he gave away, and in the quiet, profound beauty of a life lived authentically. "My greatest success was not building a billion-dollar company, but discovering that true fulfillment lies in connection, contribution, and the simple joys of everyday existence. I urge you all to look beyond the glittering distractions, to find your own Maple Creek, and to discover the boundless riches that money truly cannot buy." A hush fell over the room, followed by a standing ovation that lasted for several minutes. People wiped away tears. Reporters furiously scribbled notes. His message, delivered with such genuine humility and conviction, resonated deeply. He accepted the award, a simple crystal plaque, and quickly exited the stage, leaving Evelyn and Harrison to field the media frenzy. He slipped out of the ballroom, took a quiet taxi to Penn Station, and boarded an Amtrak train back to Ohio. He left the glitz and glamour behind, returning to the quiet comfort of his modest home, his Honda Civic, and the simple, fulfilling life he had so deliberately chosen. The award was a recognition, yes, but the true prize was the peace he found in his everyday existence. If his message resonates with you, please like this story, subscribe for more inspiring narratives, comment on what true wealth means to you, and share this story to spread the message of purposeful living. Years turned into decades. Arthur Finch, now in his late 70s, continued to live his quiet life in Maple Creek. His hair was whiter, his steps a little slower, but his eyes still held the same kind twinkle and profound contentment. The Honda Civic, the reliable one, finally gave out and was replaced by a slightly newer, but equally modest, Toyota Corolla. Maria's Sweet Delights had expanded, now with 2 additional locations in neighboring towns, and Maria, a successful entrepreneur, still visited Arthur regularly, bringing him fresh pastries and updates on her business. She often credited him, the retired consultant, with her success. "He taught me to focus on the heart of the business, not just the bottom line," she'd tell her employees. The Miller family farms, thanks to the sustainable practices Arthur had subtly introduced, had become a model for small-scale regenerative agriculture in Iowa, drawing visitors and agricultural students from across the Midwest. John Miller, now a respected voice in the farming community, often spoke of the wise old farmhand who had helped him see things differently. Mrs. Beatrice Holloway, Arthur's beloved chess partner, had passed away peacefully in her sleep at 98, leaving Arthur her worn wooden chessboard, a cherished memento of their shared moments. Arthur now played chess with her great-grandson, a bright-eyed boy named Leo, teaching him the strategies and the quiet patience of the game. The Finch Philanthropic Trust had become one of the most influential charitable organizations in the world, its impact felt in countless lives. Evelyn Reed, as CEO, had become a respected figure in philanthropy, often fielding questions about the mysterious Mr. Finch, who had endowed such a remarkable organization. Harrison Thorne, though retired from active investment, remained on the board, ensuring the trust's financial stability and strategic direction. Arthur's sister, Ellie, and her husband, Rick, had, after years of struggle and hardship, finally found a semblance of peace. They had rebuilt their lives, albeit on a much smaller scale. Rick had found work as a project manager for a local construction company, and Ellie had started a small online business selling handmade jewelry. The painful lessons of their past had, slowly and painfully, taught them the value of hard work and humility. They no longer demanded anything from Arthur, and their infrequent calls were now tinged with a newfound respect, even a quiet apology. Chloe and Brandon, after their own difficult journeys, had found their footing, pursuing careers that, while not glamorous, provided them with a sense of purpose and self-reliance. They had learned to appreciate their uncle not for his past wealth, but for his enduring wisdom and quiet strength. One sunny afternoon, Arthur sat on his back porch, sipping a cup of 8 o'clock coffee, watching the squirrels chase each other up an old oak tree. He felt a profound sense of gratitude. He had lived a life that, by conventional measures, had taken a dramatic turn from immense wealth to purposeful simplicity. But for Arthur, it wasn't a decline, it was an ascent. He had found true freedom, not in the ability to buy anything, but in the ability to choose everything that truly mattered. His life was a quiet symphony of small moments, genuine connections, and meaningful contributions. He had proven that happiness wasn't a destination, but a journey, found not in the pursuit of more, but in the appreciation of enough. He had lived a life well lived, a testament to the enduring truth that the greatest riches are those that money cannot buy. Thank you for watching The Millionaire Who Lives Like a Normal Person. We hope this story encourages you to seek out your own moments of tranquility and remember what truly matters in life. Don't forget to like, subscribe, comment, and share.